Welcome to the Reconciliation Conversation. We want this podcast to be a space where we can expose hate, encourage love, equip for healthy reconciliation, and emphasize unity so that all people can know their value together as one. Welcome to another edition of the Reconciliation Conversation podcast. As always, my name is Derrick DeLain. I'm here with my man, Jason Dukes. What's up, bro? How you doing?
What's up, man? Glad that you are with us. Glad to be with you and excited about our guest today.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, without further ado, let's jump in. So our next guest is from the Memphis area. She is a female vocalist for DiverseCity, which is TobyMac's music group. She's a mentor for an all-girls choir called Angel Street. Singer, songwriter, worship leader. She is living her dream in her pursuit of this music career. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Terrian. How is it going today, Terrian?
Man, it's been a beautiful day. It really has. My mom and little sister has been spending the night with me the past few nights. My husband's out doing crew work on the road, so I've been kicking it with them. So it's been good.
That's awesome.
Nice. It's always good to have family around. Well, listen, we want to jump right in. For our listeners, we would love for you to just tell us a brief overview of your story. If you want to go as personal as you're comfortable with, but include in that your journey into where you are now with music.
Cool. So I grew up in North Memphis, which is the hood in Memphis, Tennessee. My granddad was a pastor, well, still is a pastor, actually. And my dad was the assistant pastor of that church until he got his own ministry a few years ago. And I started singing in the church. The way it worked was they just call you up. You got to be ready. And so I was like 5. Yeah.
For real.
I was like 5 years old, and they were like, "Princess, come give us a song." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I would love to." Stepped up there, remixed the ABC song, and they were like, "Oh man, like I think this girl's got a voice," So they kept calling me up to sing like all the time. So shout out to my Aunt Carolyn, because she is the reason like I am singing today. It started there, and then just every season of my life, the Lord brought along mentors to help nurture the gift He had given me. And that just helped me become better, gave me more opportunities, which led to where I am today. I mentioned Angel Street before we started filming this, and Angel Street, meeting my manager through that, and her just going into the Christian music industry, and just like knocking down doors, man, and just being bold and being like, "Yo, this girl here from Memphis, I'm telling you, just give her a chance." So shout out to Jill. Jill Dyson is my manager. She's also the founder of Angel Street as well, and it's a powerful work that they're doing in North Memphis, which is where I grew up, seeing these girls be impacted the same way I was. My senior year of high school when I joined Angel Street, it has been such a blessing to watch. And I guess I'll say exactly how I got to Toby's team. The nonprofit in my neighborhood called Oasis of Hope, the executive director of that knew Toby's manager. I guess they met at a random event somewhere. And he's always had that connection, and was just like, "Yo, Terrian, if you ever want to be connected to TobyMac, let me know. I'd be glad to connect you to his manager." I didn't know who TobyMac was, so I had no idea who he was. I did not know contemporary Christian music was even a thing. All I knew was gospel music and R&B. That's it. So once I, realized who Toby was, I was like, sure, I guess we should, maybe pursue this team and see what happens. And my manager said it out of her mouth. She was like, "Terrian, we got to get you on Toby's team. We're going to get you on Toby's team." I'm like, "Sure, if you think we can do it, let's go for it." And we hit up that connection we had to Toby's manager. We called Dan Pitts, and Dan Pitts was very kind to have a meeting with us in Franklin, set up a couple of songwriting sessions for us with some of the guys that they typically send new artists to. He was just trying to gauge and see what kind of an artist I would be. And originally, we weren't even talking about joining DiverseCity. It was just assigned to the label. And the Lord had such a way that I came around this team when Nerva was leaving DiverseCity, which was Toby's like 17-year-long female background vocalist. And so I got to join DiverseCity and got signed to Goatee in the same year. And I mean, just talking about a complete dream come true to get to work with a team that's just like after the Lord's heart. And so yeah, I'm super grateful for this journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I mean, thank you. Number one, thank you for sharing your journey. But obviously, as a musician, I would love to hear. We would love to hear what music has inspired you and is currently inspiring you the most.
Yeah. So the sound that I knew I wanted to get into probably about 6 months ago was like, I want to be as soulful as I possibly can be for the CCM world. So that led me to listen to more old school soulful stuff. So every now and again, I'm trying to listen to like some Stevie stuff that I really like, or some Lauryn Hill that I really like. And the key to that is finding a producer within the CCM realm that can produce that kind of a sound. And thankfully we found that. So it's been really, really fun writing these new songs. And I finally like have my sound. And of course I am super encouraged by worship music in general. I've been a worship leader for 6 years, I think, since like 2014. Awesome. I got, like, fresh out of high school, I got to start doing that thing. And so whenever I'm writing worship music, I'm just like trying to find the right chords and and just got the Bible wide open, looking through scripture and just all that. So yeah, it's fun to just pull from different people who have done it well and who have succeeded.
Yeah, I love that, and I think I love how when you came into the game, how you're like, man, I want to create a sound or have a sound that like I'm comfortable with, that I'm familiar with, to essentially diverse a genre of music that historically has not been diverse. So I became a believer when I was 16. I was heavy into, hip hop, so on and so forth. And I had a lot of guys who were discipling me, like handing me albums, so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, one of the albums that they gave me was DC Talk that, Toby is on. And I just remember thinking like, yo, this ain't the move. Like it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I'm being real. It wasn't me. And so to have someone come into it with the perspective of like, hey, I want to do something that is comfortable to who I am and like how God has wired me. I think that's huge. That's huge. Because there's enough people trying to fit in, right? Like we need someone who can like step outside the comfort zone a little bit. I'm glad you're doing that.
It's funny that you said somebody that can, just kind of step outside of the comfort zone. I think initially, because I realized just because you love a sound of music doesn't necessarily mean that's the sound of music that you should go for. And at first, I was writing a lot of like Christian pop music, and I was like, man, why am I going back and forth so much on like if I dig this or not, And I don't think that's your sound. It's just as simple as that. And the cool thing about soulful music is that it's so timeless. Pop music like changes so often over time. You always have to ride the wave that pop music is on. And I'm like, man, soul music has kind of been the same sonically since the very beginning, with just like hints of modern twist on it. So I'm super grateful that I just feel at home finally again, with the sound. So yeah.
That's so good.
I love it.
Yeah.
Mind
so
you,
good.
now I've diversified and I've listened to some TobyMac and stuff now too. I'll just say that. I didn't want to make it seem like.
Well, no, and
I had to say that.
I get it.
I don't know him. I don't know him like Terrian does, but I would say I can't imagine that he would be offended if you said to him, Derrick, "Hey, your stuff for recently is a little bit better than that old rap, back in the day." Like,
I think he would agree. I think many people we gonna.
But no offense, Toby. We love you.
You're not going down that path.
Let's honor him. Let's honor him for a minute. That he develops a lot of other people in this town. He pours into,
Yep.
And so we want to honor him for that.
I know. Yeah.
But he's better today than he was back on that Free at Last album. Let's go ahead and say it. So, but I'm like you, Derek. I grew up on hip hop, and so I still listen to it. And so it's funny to me when people would give me those albums growing up. The best one they ever gave me was a group called SFC. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They were like they weren't even that great, right? But they were much better than the other stuff people were giving me. Because I was too hooked on Run DMC and if we want to go off on this, Eazy-E and Tupac and if I can be is it okay to say NWA? Like, I mean, dang, like I might get ostracized, like, as a pastor.
We might edit that out. We got to edit that out.
But like, that's what I grew up on. Like, I try to forget those lyrics now, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say, love what you're doing with that, and we're excited to highlight those songs to folks, those singles that you got going.
Yeah, dude. Thank you.
So, Reconciliation Conversation, the name of this podcast, and racism, anti-racism, and where we are right now in 2020 culture in America. In your story, we've talked so far about where you come from, about music, that kind of thing, but when it comes to that topic, when it comes to what's going on right now around us, that's very vivid and very in our face. What's a story maybe from your own experiences as to why this is something that grabs your attention, and why it's something we need to really be paying attention to?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the hood, and I think the biggest issue with racism is that it is systemic, and I think the oppression of Black communities is a systemic racism issue, which is why I'm really grateful these conversations are being had now, finally, after all of this time. And I personally, I've had like a couple of like minor instances, but nothing to where like I felt like my life was in danger. Now my dad, on the other hand, and my husband, like that's a completely different thing. And this might sound crazy, but I believe one of the reasons I haven't felt threatened or been in harm's way in regards to racism is, one, because I'm female, and then two, because I'm light-skinned. It seems that what has happened is darker skinned people have been seen as more of a threat to law enforcement, and sometimes to other races, and sometimes to our own people. And my dad and my husband are both darker skinned males. And so they are automatically seen as a threat. And something I think the thing that could fix this, one, is we've got to really like handle the perceptions we just have of people. Like, I can't call out any preconceived notions another race has about me if I'm going to be the same way about you and your people, and so it starts there. It's like, can we first and foremost treat everybody as human, and not these preconceived notions you have about the ethnicity of a person. And two, reformation within law enforcement. I think there has been a great lack of accountability, which is why we are outraged. It's like, you aren't holding these officers accountable enough. That's what we want to see. And the fact that Chauvin, the guy who had his knee on Floyd's neck, had, I think, 13 prior complaints against him, and so I'm like, we've got to be a bit stricter than we've been before, because that could have been prevented. I don't know. Personally, it's like, I don't know, there might need to be like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. Probably not even that, but just hold people accountable. And I don't think all cops are bad by any means. I think there are incredible cops who are deeply offended by the actions of these bad apples. And so I think we got to come after the system. I think that's the biggest threat to ending racism, and that stops the progression of anti-racism.
Man, that's
so good.
There's, and to be honest, I think obviously when we have conversations like this, right, there's always a lot to unpack. How do we go about, addressing the system, right? And I think that, again, just going back, we know that John Lewis, a civil rights activist who just recently passed, in his time, there was a lot that he was doing to change about legislation, right? And I think that's why there's such this, there needs to be an emphasis on not only voting, right? I think we just kind of throw that out willy-nilly. Hey, go out and vote. Yes, go out and vote. But in the voting, educate yourself in such a way where you're trying to see who are the individuals who can be put into these positions to seek change, to speak about this systemic change that needs to happen. Something I tell people all the time, I think we have become so comfortable with like voting straight party, right? And it's like, man, what would it look like for us to vote with our neighbor in mind, right? Like love God, love God and then love your neighbor as yourself. What would it look like if I voted for individuals with my neighbor in mind, the way that I'm loving myself, I'm thinking about that individual to, man, what I just saw happen over here, man, someone can get put in a position to change that. It's a lot. Like it's a big thing, a big picture that needs to be addressed, and it's a lot.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I also think too, we got both sides saying go vote, assuming that we're gonna just go vote for their side because they're telling us to go vote.
Side, right?
And I'm just like, wait a second, it don't work like that. That's not how it should work for us.
It doesn't.
Sadly, a lot of people are going to do that. They're just going to go vote for the person that said whatever they thought, was what should have been said at the moment without looking at, legislation that's going to be passed and just for the betterment of your neighbor, like you said.
So good. Yeah.
And that's why I love this is, go ahead. My bad, Jason. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I just was going to say one thing real quick. I think I want to remind our listeners that we can get caught up in sensationalism and miss the substance.
Yep.
Right. And that's what I hear you saying. That's what I'm hurt. I grieved over this week a little bit as I'm watching the news, as I'm seeing some of the things that are going on right now. I feel like we forgot why this started back at the end of May, right? Like it was about the fact that the police brutality that you mentioned, John Lewis. I mean, he mentioned as a highlight in his speech when he spoke on the same stage as Dr. MLK Jr. back in 1963, if I remember correctly, right? Which, by the way, he spoke a different speech. He changed the speech before he went out there because MLK and Dr. Phillips asked him to change it because it was too straightforward and honest. And if you get a chance, you should Google what the real speech is.
In Washington?
Yeah, he spoke on that same stage of the I Have a Dream. And before he went out there, MLK, and I think it's Dr. Phillips, I think it's his last name. He was 73 years old at the time. And King was more, I think, in his 30s or 40s. And Phillips was 23.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, excuse me. Lewis was 23. And so here he was. He had this great prophetic speech, and the whole highlight of it was the way that Black brothers and sisters were being treated, mainly by police, but by the system that was hurting them and oppressing them. And they asked him, King and the other guy asked him to change the speech. There were 10 components of it that he changed. You should Google the original speech.
Wow.
But I say that to say, like, let's don't miss the substance in our voting. Let's don't miss the substance in this moment, because we're getting sensationalized by all the sides and the polarization, and all the substance of this was people were getting killed by a group of bad apples that weren't being held accountable.
Yep.
That's the substance of it. Now, there's more to it than that, right? We've admitted that. We've admitted on this show, multiple people have said there is more to it than that. But let's don't miss the substance of why we revved up in this moment, right? I mean, that's the big deal.
Man, I'm so with you on that. I think the most disheartening thing initially was seeing just people trying to force other conversations to happen so that the conversation on racism would not happen, you know?
Right.
And it just seems like now looking back on everything and just seeing like how everything has progressed over the past couple of months, you've got both sides doing the exact same thing, just in completely different forms. You've got the right saying, well, racism is a fallacy. It doesn't exist anymore. And really, police brutality isn't even the real problem. The real problem is the fact that Black babies are being killed in abortions. And you got Black on Black crime. And then you got the left saying, no, let's only talk about police brutality. We don't need to talk about the other stuff. And so I'm like, you guys are both doing the exact same thing. And it's driving me a little cray-cray, you know? And
for real.
I think, like, just as a believer, we should be outraged about any injustice and any sin, period. We should not be proud of. We shouldn't be happy about it. That should be a given, you know? And I think, just can we be just as outraged about everything, you know, but also don't neglect conversations that should happen because they need to happen. And the topic of racism has just been avoided and avoided and avoided and avoiding. And it's like, well, here we are now. I mean, this is a hot mess. I mean, we've been trying to deal with this for a long time and nobody really wanted to just dive deep and do the thing, you know? So, yeah.
So good.
Well, let me. So I'm a kind of switch a little bit because you're kind of hitting on it a little bit in what you're saying in those last couple sentences. But you are in a group called DiverseCity, right?
Yeah.
Number one, there's a reason why it's named that, and if you don't feel like you have to go into like the full nuances to why Toby decided to name it that. But I would love to hear what has that experience for you been like to be a part of a group called DiverseCity?
Right. It's kind of, that's a funny name. And I love it because I think often what it seems like multicultural churches do is like the picture of multi-ethnic, you know, congregations. But it ain't no real diversity, you know, just I'm like, somebody lying somewhere. This ain't real diverse if you ask me. But I love being in DiverseCity because I think it really is a genuine representation of what diversity looks like. It was really hard for us to not be together around this time because we're always having these conversations. And I think because we all come up in different, you know, neighborhoods, different socioeconomic brackets, obviously different ethnicities, different races. So we've got all kinds of different ideals floating around this bus that we travel on together. And I think too, when you understand the heart and the intention behind your brother or sister, you'll be patient and you'll ask and answer and feel free to do that, you know, without judgment coming to you. And I think there's a closeness of just family that we share, where it's like if one of the white guys on our bus were to ask one of us a question that would be just, you know, demonized by everybody else, we're not going to approach it that way. You know, this is our brother asking us a genuine question on why shouldn't I think this way, or what's the deal with this, and how do you guys truly feel about this? Why do you feel that way? You know, and I think those conversations are kind of being shunned a little bit. When sometimes I just feel like I just think people just are trying to know, you know, and so I think you've got to just be family, man. Just be family. Be willing to be family. And with that comes, you know, sometimes tension and friction, awkward silence. And sometimes you got to be like, well, you know, so guys, how about that toast? Like, you know, like just cover it up with something, you know, but I think we're doing the hard work on that bus, and we're having hard conversations, real conversations, because I mean, you don't want to be hypocrites and not actually be diverse and stand on stage and be like, look, black and white people coming together. And then there's all this division going on backstage. You know, it just, you know, you can't do that. And so it starts with leadership as well. Toby is really passionate about diversity, and he welcomes that. He opens the floor for that behind the stage, and that's carried this band and why they're still together after all of these years.
I love that. I love that.
So good.
We the thing that you said, which I love, and Jason, we've spoken about this, is you are hitting on a lot of major points that oftentimes we miss in this conversation. What I mean by that, there is beauty in trust and assuming the best, but that trust and assuming the best in those conversations happen in healthy relationship, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like there have been multiple times, like off camera, where Jason and I are talking, and Jason, either he'll say or ask, or I'll say and ask, and we're like, yo, like, is this okay? Like for me to say this out loud, is this okay? But there's a level of trust that's been built with us that we can have those conversations, right? And it's not just here. It's, I know Jason has other conversations and relationships with people that don't look like him, just as well as I have relationships and conversations with people that don't look like me. But it begins with the building that trust, assuming the best, knowing that there's going to be some stupid stuff said, right? Like we understand that, right?
Yeah.
But think about what relationship that you have been in that has not had stupid stuff said. There isn't any. Right?
None.
Right?
Yeah.
Relationships are messy. That's part of the beauty of it, right? Like think about our relationship between us and God, right? Like how messy are we, and yet He is still pursuing us. He is still coming after us. That same grace that He has extended to us. I often think that we miss out on extending that grace to others in the midst of this conversation.
Yep. Yep.
And it has to change. It has to change. Let me get off my soapbox a little bit. My bad.
No, I love it, man. I think just patience with each other is like, because I think the thing that I notice in conversations like this is like people are ready to just like say their point, in rebuttal to the other point that's being made, instead of just being like, let me try and put myself in the person who's speaking shoes right now, and not be so offended easily. Like we get so offended real fast these days, and I'm just like, everybody mad. Just mad. Like, just take a moment before you respond and speak to be like, okay, I can understand why that person would think and say that about this. Now let me see if I can offer, just a little bit of critique to that, and that's what happens on our bus all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that. I wish we could just take that snippet that you just said, rewind it, and play it again.
Over
because
and over. That's right.
I think over and over and over and over again. The whole idea of putting yourself in another person's shoes, hearing their perspective, and truly listening, right? Without like, oh, I'm here to engage in this conversation with you, Terrian, until you say something that like I'm about to jump on, right? Like I'm just waiting for that to happen. That's not a posture of listening to learn. And I think we miss that often in the reconciliation conversation, right? Like we want to have a conversation, but not with the end goal to reconcile. We want to have it to be heard, to make a point. So,
well, I just want to affirm I want to affirm what you said, but I want to call out the white skinned folks out there for a minute and say, I notice among other white skinned leaders, we don't often even approach the meetings that we're a part of with our church family or the dinner table with our family, or we don't often approach it as learners. Right. So part of the problem, it really is it's what we're hitting on here. It really is a different posture, right? Like it is we're all learners. Like I don't know everything, but I know a bunch of white leaders who all try to approach every meeting like they're the smartest dude in the room.
Yeah.
And we need to humble ourselves and call that out. Whether you're brown skin, white skin, whatever skin, we need to call it out and say, let's learn with each other, right? Like to me, and it's just that theological idea that God, the Father, decided to name His Son God with us. because we don't have to live for him. We get to live with him.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same moment, he then calls us to live with each other.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work. It doesn't work unless we take a posture of, you matter and are worth dying for, and I am too. And how do we honor each other and learn from each other? I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree.
As we wrap up here together, what would you suggest? You've already given some amazing suggestions, and so you may want to just highlight some of the ones you've given. You may have something else that's on your heart and your mind to say, but what would you suggest? And I'll even make it two parts. One, what would you suggest to our listeners out there if they just want to take another step in this significant journey toward reconciliation and oneness? But then secondly, if there's a young artist out there, right, like how do you encourage them in this and be someone that can seek that peace and that reconciliation there as well?
For sure. So to answer the first part, I think it just starts person to person. So it starts really small, I think, and really asking the Lord to reveal if there are any if there's any prejudice in your heart against another ethnicity, simply because of the color of their skin. And I think that goes for every race of people within the body of Christ. I think sometimes we all grow up with these, ideas of who people are without even knowing them. And we identify them based off of historically what their people have done over time. And you have to understand that individuals don't even represent a race in its entirety. And so give everyone the benefit of the doubt to begin with. Just start there. See people as Jesus would see them, and that's someone who deserves or needs grace just like you do. And yeah, start there too. I would say just start educating yourself. Read books that could just help you in this area, help you in this subject. My friends and I started reading a book together, So You Want to Talk About Race, and that's been really helpful for us to just kind of dive a little deeper into some issues that's been going on in America. Chew the meat, spit out the bones, so I think to start the next book we'll read is The New Jim Crow, which is a more harder read. So with all the stats and numbers that come along with that book.
Oh yeah, go ahead and get ready for that's deep. And then watch, films that educate us on this as well. I mean, The 13th on Netflix is pretty good. And the adaptation of The Central Park 5, I think, watch that. I know some people were like, wait, does this really happen behind doors? And I'm like, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised that, so yeah, just educate yourself. And I think because there is a lack of education, we tend to think things aren't really that big of a deal. So yeah, because that education can be eye-opening to a lot of things. So read some books. And to answer your second question, I would say to any artist wanting to do this, first, just be sure that this is what the Lord is calling you to. Don't try knocking down doors that he ain't trying to open for you. Like, just start there. And two, if it is, just surrender to his will. Like, you've got to be so sensitive to the Holy Spirit, because not every door that opens is like one from the Lord. And that's something that I've had to be really cautious of walking through this journey. And then two, check your intentions. Like, are you doing this for the gospel of Jesus, or are you doing this to just like be seen and just have fun and just sing, so I think the only reason I do this is because I have a conviction that Jesus Christ is the only way, and that he is Lord and Savior, and music is the way that I get to spread that message and have a platform to speak about Jesus. And so just check your heart, check your intentions, and practice, write, play music, whatever it is that you're wanting to do in this industry, do it, and don't let anybody else tell you either that you can't. Like, I know that can be a little cliche to say, but like, so often we allow people's like opinions to affect us and affect our walk and what, our dreams are. And I'm just like, no, man, if the Lord is calling you to do it, like,
he will show you favor. Just be faithful and be patient and just like really, really nurture the gift that he's given you. And get around the right folks, man. Like don't get around snakes. Don't get around people who are going to like steer you in a bad direction. Like you just got to be careful, man, because this platform brings a lot of people, you know, to watch you, and you got a lot of eyes on you. People are praising you from left and right. Like you just got to make sure you got a good group of people around you that are keeping you grounded in Christ, and will call you out when you're tripping. So yeah.
Good.
That's so good.
Well, Terrian, thank you, number one. But two, man, if there are individuals who, you know, just kind of want to follow you, listen to you a little bit, are you on Twitter, social media, Instagram, any of that stuff? Are you on any of that?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at I am Terrian. On Twitter, that's a good question. I never pay attention to my Twitter handles. I have no idea what to tell you in regards to that. Yeah, the same thing for Facebook. I think it's just Terrian on Facebook and YouTube. Type in Terrian and it should come up. There's another Terrian on there, and I'm like, well, she's a white girl, so I'm black. Just in case you don't see my face, I'm black. There's your indication.
I love it. Yeah. Cool. Well, again, we just want to say thank you for joining us today on the Reconciliation Conversation. This has been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more, and I'm looking forward to adding another singer in on my repertoire, my Spotify playlist. So thank you very much for that. Excited to check you out and share you with my family, my little girl. She will definitely love to listen to you. So as always, my name is Derrick DeLain. I'm here with my good friend Jason Dukes. Thank you again for joining us on the Reconciliation Conversation. We'll catch you next time as we continue the conversation. Peace out.
All right.
Thank you for joining in on the Reconciliation Conversation. Remember, you can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Recon Combo. You can also stay connected with us through our website, reconciliationconversation.com, or feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel under No More Night Media. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you next time.